I hope you can hear me well.
Yeah.
So given the fact that so much has already been talked about, both on the demand side as well as on the supply side, I was listening to Mr. Osman's initiatives with great interest, because our own story started with way back in 1995. In November 1995, the very first delegation of Pakistan's IT companies, there were 8 of them, was taken by the newly formed Pakistan Software Export Board. And we went to Comdex, the biggest event in the US in Las Vegas. And that is the beginning of the 2 or 3 company that broke into the software export market. Prior to 1995, there was only one other company from Pakistan, which doesn't exist today, but in those days it was a very large company set up by the Crescent Group, the textile group of Pakistan, and the company's name was Crestsoft. They were the pioneers who had broken into the American market in 1993. So we followed with a bunch of 3 or 4 companies in early 1996. So one of my recommendations would be, as Mr. Usman Nasser mentioned, that we need to have more Pakistani software company delegations to Canada. Now, I myself have been part of a couple of delegations in the past to Canada, but more on those trips, my feeling was that most of our interaction was happening with the government representatives of the Canadian, let's say around the city of Toronto, or I went to Montreal once. So my recommendation would be that if the consulate or other Pakistani individuals are interested in increasing exports, if more and more events could be identified in Canada, some of those could be funded by the Pakistan Software Export Board, but many others could just be funded by companies who can collaborate together, and private initiatives could be taken. And the reason I'm saying that is that in the US, there are now a lot of companies who are large enough that they do not need any Pakistan Software Export Board money. Our company, for example, we participate in about a dozen events in the US, which are very specific to the kind of work that we do. We don't need any government support, so we do that privately from our own resources. On the Canadian side, however, what can happen is that perhaps somebody can compile what those specialized events are. The interaction around technology over the last 25 years has also changed. Today, you will not find an event like Comdex. It will be far and it will be few and far, between whether you can find an event like that. Now the events are more structured around specialized topics like artificial intelligence, like cloud computing. So my view is that if we can compile a list of those events, which are both in person and in digital form. Since COVID, I have only participated in one big event in the US in person, but I participated in about half a dozen digital events. And these are perhaps the best forum now for us now to capture attention of the marketplace, because the buyer is not interested today in entertaining salespeople who try to wine and dine them, which was the mode of selling into larger organizations 20 years ago, 10 years ago. Today, the buyer is interested in buying at their own time when they are interested in looking for specific vendors who can provide. So that traditional selling model, I believe, doesn't hold true anymore. It doesn't hold true for our company. We try to get work by taking up speaking slots at various events. So my view is that increasingly Pakistani companies or their founders or their CEOs need to speak at events, not just participate at these events. If I go to a typical event in the US, there might be, 30% of the speakers are Indian. And when I find a Pakistani speaker, I usually go and hug them because there are so few of them speaking at events in the US. So in a competitive marketplace where there are companies not only from India, there are companies now coming from various Eastern European countries, from Mexico. They're all competing for work. And many of them are now heading to Canada also, because the Canadian IT sector has also exploded in a big way. So my view is we should take more active role in participating in these specialized events where people are coming looking for expertise, and we should try to stand out from competition by taking up speaking slots and being presenters at conferences rather than just idle participants. Okay, so that's one way I think on the demand side we can increase the participation of the Pakistani diaspora as well as Pakistani companies who want to come here and get work. The other recommendation I think is that on the supply side, as you know, very briefly, the Pakistani, at least the software part of the IT sector, is basically three chunks. One is obviously the software export part, where we hire resources in Pakistan who are developing software for the US or Middle Eastern countries or other countries. The other sector is the domestic IT, people who are servicing domestic companies, enterprises in Pakistan. And the third sector, which has exploded, is now being funded by the venture capital money, is the sector where businesses are being launched in Pakistan, which are predicated on technology. Okay, now all three of them, as it happens, we know that they are exploding, and the demand is so high that in our own company, our salaries are going up at a 30% year-on-year increases in rupee terms. Okay, but one of the things that I've noticed, which is very perturbing, is that the leading universities, so for example, in our company, we hire from a total of about a dozen universities, but the bulk of our workforce comes from 6 universities, and I can name them. 3 of them are from the private sector, which are LUMS, UET Lahore, and the third private university is the IBA Karachi. Okay, and on the government sector, there are 3 universities like NUST, GIK, and FAST, which has, the UIT is FAST is a private one, or I misnamed it. UET is a government sector university, but the government one are NUST, GIK, and UET. Now, if you look at the budgets of these universities, just to give you some numbers, these are shockingly low. The budget of UET Lahore is no more than $5 or $6 million. When I visited in 2004, I visited as part of a delegation taken by the IT ministry to China. We went to the Beijing University, and their budget, the annual budget in 2004 was $200 million. So if you're talking of increasing our exports by so many $1 billion in the next few years, and our universities, the key universities, the top 6 universities in Pakistan, have budgets of a few $1 million, which is less than a third of a typical commercial building that is set up on the main boulevard Lahore or on Sharai Faisal in Karachi. That is a big mismatch. So we need to make a pitch to the government that at least in the public sector universities, the budgets have to go significantly up. If you take a look at the typical salary of, let's say, a graduate who has worked in the software export industry for 5 years, their salary is now touching 300,000 rupees. Now, that is a salary of a professor who has been teaching kids like that for 20 years or 10 years or whatever. So the point is, we need to, if we need to invest in the right places, and the right places are the top 6, 7, 8, 10 universities of Pakistan. Their budgets have to be blown up. They have to go up not by a factor of 2, they have to go up with a factor of 5 or 6 times. The Beijing University budget that I mentioned, which was $200 million in 2004, has crossed $1 billion per annum, which is comparable to the budgets of not the very top universities in America, but the second tier in the US. So I think these are some of on the demand side. Unless we really invest in universities and in those particular colleges which feed up to the universities also, you just can't blow up the budgets of universities and not take a look at the feeding colleges. So if the intake is increased on the university side, without investments also in subsidiary colleges which feed to these universities, you will have a quality problem still, because the intake quality will go down, the average intake quality. So see, these are some of the things that quickly come to mind, and I'll be happy to take any questions and I'd like to other participants to, since we are running short on time, I'll let other people speak. Thank you.